Hello and welcome to Undercommon Taste. This is a podcast where we create and discuss homebrew content for tabletop RPGs.
Welcome to my parlor, said the spider to the fly.
I'm Ian Woodworth. I'm joined by my co-host James Daly, and today we're going to talk a little bit about something that I think gets overlooked, and that is using your location strategically as a game master or a dungeon master, as a storyteller, somebody who is, running the game. Primarily things like you have your players in a house. What are some things you can do with the house as the person running the game to add to the conflict within the game, to add to the strategic elements, to add to the challenges for the players? And I just had this on my brain. I know we talked about this a little bit whenever we were playing Forever Home for our holiday game, but it's been on my brain because last week I got my home inspector's license.
Huzzah! Congrats.
So I am now a licensed home inspector in the state of Tennessee, and so that got me really thinking about using the house as an environment to assist gameplay and storytelling for your players.
Yeah, no, I like this. I've seen a couple games. I've played a handful of games that brush on this lightly. I think one of the best ones that have done it personally is Pillars of Eternity. When you have your little compound, you get your castle. They handle this really well, I think, and there is a lot to it. Other games where it's kind of you work on your dwelling or your central locations is something like Darkest Dungeon, where it's not necessarily your personal house, but your little village area that you're in. These are both kind of good ways where you're kind of building up, the community around you, and therefore you're going to get some sort of benefit when your party's out. The other really interesting story hook that I've seen, and this is more of an old meme, but it's gotten quiet over a while, is that you or your party are adventurers that have done quite well and are ready to retire. But when you go out to adventure or do your last few missions, you find that people might be raiding your home for your treasures that you've stored up. And so now you're trying to put up some defenses and some minions and some hirelings to defend your treasure. And maybe you need more traps coming in. And pretty soon you realize after, a long series of campaigns and events that your home has become the dungeon. And now you are the big bad at the center of the dungeon guarding your own personal treasure.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. There's a video game on a similar premise. I think it's called Dungeon Keeper.
Keeper, yeah.
Where you are in control of this dungeon and the whole game is you setting up traps and putting monsters in your dungeon to keep the adventurers out of your treasure.
Yes.
Yes.
That's a fun little game. I do enjoy that one.
Yeah, that one's on my to-play list. I've still not gotten around to getting a chance to play that one.
It's definitely dated, but it is fun. The concept's fun. It's well done for the time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I like the more retro games anyway,
Fair.
By and large. I mean, if you don't count World of Warcraft expansions, I think the last video game that I actually bought new at time of release was Fallout 4.
Okay.
So yeah, it's been a hot minute since I bought a new video game.
So once again, proving that Ian and I are opposite ends of the coin. I just bought Slay the Spire last night. Or Slay the Spire 2, actually. It just released on early access. I'm like, yes. I've been waiting for like a year and a half for him to drop that one.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a simple man. I know what I like, and once I have a game that I like, I keep playing it. It's just how it goes. But talking about, houses and such, yeah, that is one approach, and we can dive into that and talk about it a bit, that whole setting up a base and using location as a way to ground your party in the world and give them a connection to the world. But I'm also thinking of it more along the lines of in a game like Alien Isolation, where you're going through the ship trying to avoid the alien.
Yeah, that is an amazing game. I love that game. It's very well done.
And you're having to use the terrain, use the vents, use the closets, use the lockers, use the furniture as ways to keep yourself safe and to move without detection.
Okay.
And so these sorts of ways of utilizing the space as a strategic terrain feature and as obstacles and, as interactive things to further the story. These are also topics that I'm kind of wanting to touch on tonight.
Okay. So yeah, we can definitely do that. The first thing when you talk about that I would see is, again, you're going to have to lean as a DM into your map making skills. You can find like little top downs of homes or houses pretty much anywhere. You can kind of get that, especially like if you're looking for apartments they have. I'm sure there's a word for it that's technically correct. I just know it's the little kind of outline of each of the rooms.
Yeah, layouts.
Yeah, the layouts. And if you want this for a party, I think a layout that is more, generally more open, but where your rooms connect. You don't want something like a ranch where it's just one room that leads to another, and everything kind of branches off. That's going to be more difficult. But if you have a room like you have your living room or your entryway, and then you have a den that connects to a kitchen that also connects to the living room, and the kitchen connects back to a... So you have circuitous routes that your players can kind of move around and still access, is a good way to do that. And that way you can make use of multiple instances of items you may have left behind or things that you may affect terrain, etc.
Yeah. And I can't remember who it was. It was somebody back when Twitter was still Twitter. One of the other creators that we were mutuals with on Twitter was a map maker, and they were doing a project at one point where they were making just an absolutely massive like citadel.
Ooh.
And I think they were adding a room a day for the
Okay.
year. And so they were doing the layout of all of these different rooms and how they all connected to one another. And last time I saw it, it was about half done. I don't know if it ever actually came to fruition, and I cannot for the life of me remember the name of this individual. Because then Twitter exploded, and we all kind of scattered, and I haven't really done much in the line of social media presence since then because it's too much work to get established on another platform.
It is a challenge. I think
my brain meats can't handle that right now.
Yeah. If you want something kind of quick and dirty that fits this model, if you're a fan of Blizzard and you've played WoW, any of the quote the keeps that are pretty standard, that's a pretty good model. You generally have one entranceway and then it branches left and right. And they can go straight back into 2 or 3 rooms, but then there's a center room that each one will meet in the middle. Generally, that room will have stairs going down to a basement area and stairs going up to another branching left-right path that have places that can go up and above, and then another center room that's kind of central. So again, you have ways where you can go around in a 1D circle or a 2D circle. And again, this kind of lets you move around, maneuver, and loop, especially, if your players don't have full access to how the map looks and you're kind of like doing the discovery thing, like you can do with lighting in Roll20. The other thing is using your furniture and stuff, whatever you're going to quote decorate your home, your abode, your dwelling with. Again, these things should be destructible, which is good. That is something that's really fallen out of favor since 2nd and 3rd edition. But, the old trope of like flipping a table and using it for half cover. And yeah, let someone use it for half cover until it takes either give it a hit point, like a hit die, maybe a D10 or 2D10, or, if it takes a critical and then it shatters. But after it shatters, make that area difficult terrain so it slows people down walking through it because their footing is going to be uncertain. So you can kind of break that down and use your furniture or different things like that as kind of even just movement limiting things or offering partial cover can make a huge difference in a battle.
Yeah. And, not even approaching this from a combat perspective, because, just because you're in a building doesn't mean that you're going to fight something in it. Sometimes you're doing like a heist type scenario where you're looking for something, and having a fully furnished room, a room full of stuff, will make it much more interesting to try and toss the room to find the thing you're looking for. Because if you only give them 3 places to look, they're only going to look in 3 places.
You walk in, you see a bed, a very ornate rug, and a chamber pot. You're looking for a secret lever. I wonder where it could be.
That's when you say, that is a rug of smothering, I fireball the room from the door.
Yes, probably.
And
And of course, the answer is the
anytime there's a very ornate rug on the floor, it is a rug of smothering, and you must fireball it from the door.
yes. And of course, the secret button's in the bottom of the chamber pot, and you have to like stick your hand in there and poke it.
Yeah, because you have to do the gross thing.
Exactly.
Um,
But that said, yeah, even like walking into a library and having like not even every secret area would have to be anything important, but having a bunch of alcoves and then maybe you have, the trope of like the sliding bookcase that opens to a secret chamber or a secret door, or even just a passageway that someone could sneak in and through. That again, that's where you're going to be using your rogues. Find doors, maybe your dwarf's stone sense to see if there's any kind of change in the masonry that would indicate, a passage or a door either behind or underneath. Yeah, you could definitely do that. Lighting can be very, very important as well. Is something going to be so bright that it's going to be blinding to your players, particularly if they're from the Underdark? Or is it going to be so dark that, they're going to have issues unless they have dark vision?
right. And, depending on the objective that you're going for, lighting can help or hinder that as well. Like if you're trying to be undetected, the more light there is, the harder it is going to be for you to do that.
Yeah.
And, going to your library example with all of the alcoves, maybe what you're doing at this particular time is trying to eavesdrop on a conversation, and you're having to find ways to tuck yourself into different spots to move along with the people conversing so that you can stay close enough to hear them without looking conspicuous.
Yes, and again, for the gaming friends, a video game that does this quite well. Assassin's Creed with the eavesdropping. I haven't played the second one, but definitely the first one. You have those spots where you have to stay within range, but still remain stealth. And so for your players on a tabletop, they're going to be making that movement and that stealth check. But like your rogue, as much as they want to say, hey, I'm in the middle of a wide open room and I'm going to hide, behind what, good sir? And so making little spots where your rogues can hide or your rangers and players can hide gives that more versus, hey, I'm standing in the middle of nowhere, I'm going to disappear.
Right, because if you don't have the things there for the players to interact with, they're not going to try to interact with anything.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an excellent example is near the beginning of, I believe it was campaign 3 of Critical Role, where they're down in the bottom of this mine and they're fighting some big critter, and Liam with his halfling fighter character Orem ends up, I think it was like looping a chain around a monster and throwing it into like the cogs of this rock crusher.
Okay, so kind of like in Hellboy?
Yeah, and kind of like sucking the monster into the rock crusher.
Yeah, that's a great play. I love it.
And if it hadn't been for the fact that the thing was there, and I might be completely wrong on this, it has been years since I've since I've listened to that episode. But if that thing had not been part of the terrain on the map, Liam would have never thought to do that, because it requires that visual cue to see the thing there and think, hey, that looks like something I can interact with. What can I do with that?
Right.
And that is something that, as a dungeon designer, because that is part of the job of the storyteller as the scene prep person, that is something that you need to think about, is what sort of things can I put in here that would potentially be cool things for my players to interact with.
Yeah. And again, going through, not everything has to be combat, not everything has to be critical. You could just slowly throw in, and again, another great game that does this wonderfully, Skyrim and the Elder Scrolls series in general. WoW does it quite a bit too, but you might just leave tips about lore or things going on in town. So you might leave, an open journal or maybe a half-written letter for your players to discover that's not critical for them. But if they take the time to look and observe and find things, maybe it offers a little bit of a hint about the quest, or maybe some idea about the region that might build up into a story later on, and gives you more options as a DM for story hooks.
Yeah. And it also primes the pump as it were. As in, if you're not running this from a module, say, or even if you are running it from a module and you want to go off script, as it were, having these little tidbits of lore, having these little fragments of backstory, fragments of what you can work on. I'm trying to think of the words that I'm wanting to use here. But if you're putting these breadcrumbs in front of the players, the breadcrumbs might not have anything to do with the current objective that they're working on. But if you put these breadcrumbs in front of the players, they are going to find ways to conspiracy theory them into the objective that they're working on. And sometimes they come up with really good ideas that you can take and run with.
Absolutely.
And suddenly that becomes what's actually happening. And then your players get to feel really clever that they figured out what was going on, when in fact they told you what was going on and you let it happen.
That is great. And then too, also that definitely builds in because your players have sat there and they've started pondering something and they've shown connection to that. And now their game world is directly involved into what they're interested in. That's another thing too, is again, as you sprinkle these breadcrumbs, not everything's going to be a hit, and your players are going to read a couple notes or a couple diaries and meh, and they're going to toss them aside, and then one or two they're going to react. That is a big skill as a DM, especially for newer DMs. That can be more difficult, is learning to read the table. And just because they show a reaction to something doesn't mean it has to happen right away, but it shows that you've piqued their interest. And so that's definitely something you probably want to circle back to or use some elements, because obviously you've drawn in your player's interest versus, you know what, we're not interested in seeing an orc campaign, but oh my god, here's these two elf lovers that are, they're separated and they have this, drama going on with elf families. That's super interesting. And so you'll probably want to take things that direction rather than doing more like a battle type thing. So again, seeing where your players' interests lie as the game unfolds is a good way to, again, start building and adapting as well. And it keeps your players involved because they don't feel railroaded.
Yeah. You're talking about separated elf lovers, and suddenly my brain is going to elf divorce court.
Yes. Perfect. And see right there, that's, you throw out a breadcrumb, a player says something, people laugh, and now you've got a great idea. You know what? You're going to be a lawyer in elf divorce court, and you're finding evidence to just completely submarine the other party. That's the whole thing right there.
Yeah.
So now you have to go through their house and you're digging through because maybe elf husband / wife, whatever, was having a tryst with a gnome. And so now you are finding evidence of this forbidden elvish gnomish relationship. We have a campaign. We have a story arc. We're going.
Yeah, or at least we have a plot point.
Yeah, we have a plot point. Yeah,
maybe not a whole arc, but we definitely
maybe
have
not.
a plot
Yeah,
point.
well, I mean, again, if it's a thing, hey, we have to go through and find stuff and retrieve. Yeah, but it's definitely a couple table sessions, maybe.
Yeah, or at least something that gives the less scrupulous party members an opportunity to extort somebody.
Yes,
because extortion's
definitely a thing. And if one of your players just happens to be Larry the knicker-napping kobold, maybe they increase their collection through going through and they walk out with a backpack full of elvish and gnomish underwear. We don't know. That's up to the DM.
Right, yeah. Those are some of the things to think about with regards to, the layout of the house, the things within the house that you can interact with. Now, one of the genres of game that, thinking about the house in this way, think about the house as not necessarily a setting, but as potentially even an antagonistic character.
Yes, I was just going to say, what if the house is sentient?
I mean, it doesn't even have to be sentient. The house can be an antagonistic character without actually being sentient. And this is for things like horror games.
Yeah.
Anything where, going back to talking about Alien Isolation and the Alien RPG, it works just as well on a spaceship as it would in a house. But there are elements of being in a house that present challenges to a group of players that you can really capitalize on.
Yeah,
Things like if you're wanting to move quietly through a house, you stick close to the walls where the floor is more rigid, because if you get out towards the center of the floor, it's more likely to start creaking, because it's more likely that the supports, the beams and the joists have sagged, allowing more flex to the floor and allowing the floor to creak. Just little things like that, that if you can keep them in your head, that would really, up the ante on how to run a game like that.
absolutely. And so, as you're saying this, and as we were talking about all of this stuff, and we're talking about Alien Isolation, I apologize to the listeners. This should have come to mind much, much sooner. The first Resident Evil. You're in this huge mansion. You've got all the stuff to interact with. There's like secret locks, secret keys behind so many things, or like different parts or different pieces of the puzzle piece that you have to find in separate rooms and kind of bring them together. And then you get keys, so you have locked passages and barred ways that prevent you from getting further into the house. And those passages tend to loop back later on into the main area. You do have areas where, yeah, you don't want to walk down certain hallways because it's infested with zombies, or, your footfalls might bring attention to different things where other paths may not. But safer paths might not be initially accessible. You have parts of the house that are kind of starting to wear down and they tend to break at random points, which can cause issues either giving access to areas or preventing access to areas. So if you're a Resident Evil fan, a great point of inspiration.
Right. Yeah. And you end up having a very similar thing happening even with like the old Metroidvania games, Metroid and Castlevania and
Absolutely, yeah.
those sorts of games where, different zones are locked until you get the thing that lets you unlock that next area. I mean, it's a little bit different because it is a horror game and they're trying to build the suspense of that, but that is still an element there.
Yeah, but even if you didn't want to go full horror, you could have your players walk into a room that's maybe the owner's knickknack room, and you've got curio cabinets and shelves and books and all of this stuff, and you need to find a particular statuette or emblems that you can carry to another room to set on a mantle fireplace, because on that fireplace there should be a pair of something and there's only one. And so with that too, again, you're interacting, again, you're looking through desks, you're looking through bedding, you're looking, at shelves, you're going through every drawer or chest you can find because you're looking for this one matching piece that has been misplaced. And again, the more stuff, as Ian was saying, the more stuff you put in for your players to interact with, the more they can interact with.
Right. And the more things that they are going to want to interact with,
Yeah,
and the more potential story expansion options will come up, because they might pick up something that you just threw in there for filler and they have ascribed some meaning to it.
hmm,
And so now you have another hook for another story thing later on in the game, or possibly even an alternate solution to the problem that they're facing.
absolutely. The other thing you can do, and again, this would not necessarily need to be D&D, but specifically if you did something like maybe Kids on Bikes or Old Gods of Appalachia, something like that, if you're in a house or a dwelling or just a large building, let some of your decisions have consequences. Like you're trying to get in and the door's locked. Maybe you decide to kick in the door. And so now this door is permanently open. So at various points, you can have other things or other people come in, or maybe the person you're looking for has a route of escape that you created without realizing it. And so, again, whether it's be opening a door, opening a window, closing a thing, maybe the floor sagging in an area and it drops you down to like a basement level or a floor below because the floor's rotted out. Possibly like letting a fire escape a fireplace and causing maybe a timed escape type thing for your players because now the fire is spreading through this building and your players have to get out.
Right. Yeah. Cough, cough, skill challenges, cough, cough.
Cough, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And make sure that whatever they interact with has implications. So, talking about what James was just saying, trying to even get in to the house, if they decide to kick in the door rather than picking the lock, or, some other method, breaking out a window and reaching through and unlocking the door that way. If there is evidence that someone was there, people are going to react differently if they come home and they see their door kicked open.
Absolutely.
Or if they come home and see the glass punched out of the window of their door and the door has been unlocked. Or, if they forgot to lock the door back behind them after they picked the lock and got themselves in, because, they always lock the door. And so
Yeah.
they've got their key out and they go to unlock the door and it's already unlocked. They're suddenly on alert now. They know that something's going on and they're going to interact very differently with their surroundings than they normally would. And, that's why I mentioned bringing this into a horror game scenario. This also works really well for heist scenarios.
Yes.
Because honestly, horror and heist have very similar objectives. You're trying to get in, do the thing, and get out without being noticed.
Yeah.
There are generally very different consequences for being noticed in the two genres.
Sometimes.
Sometimes. Sometimes it's just the flavor of the consequence that changes.
Yeah.
In both instances, you're gonna die. However, it's the nature of the dying.
That's how messy it's going to be.
Yeah. How conventional it is.
Yeah. But going through and like Ian's mentioned a couple times Alien Isolation. And again, that is, if you've not played it, the immersion that game is amazing. It was originally supposed to be a VR game, and I couldn't imagine that as a VR game. It would be too much. It is a great game. But you do have these points where you have entryways that are locked and barred, and you have to find, various things to get past. You do have parts because the whole thing is being in a decommissioned space station. And so you have parts where not everything works perfectly. Things break down. Things that should work suddenly don't. And so this is another thing you can put into your domiciles is kind of like a wild magic roll. Have a roll for some sort of mechanical failure. Does the lock freeze? Does the door jam? Do the pipes freeze up? Is the water heater leaking? Is the electrical system, quote, quote, if you're doing something more modern in the house, kind of janky? And if you get too close to something, are you going to get a jolt? Is the cabinet full of potions? Is the shelves kind of weak and sagging, so everything kind of rattles if the paladin walks with their heavy armor and everything kind of starts shaking? Is there a chance of a potion falling and, causing a chain reaction of some sort? And again, this can be a random table. This can be something designed. But again, you have to think of just those random, like Murphy's Laws things that can happen.
Yeah, and, talking about Alien Isolation, another game that does this really well is Dead Space. The first one especially, I haven't played 2 or 3. From what I understand, 3 was not very good, but the first Dead Space was peak for creeping you out.
Yeah.
I honestly did not get very far into Dead Space, mainly because I was playing with a friend. It was one of those things where we were playing it in the room together in the dark for the aesthetics.
Ooh.
And after that first game session, went about 45 minutes. After that first game session, he didn't want to do it anymore.
Fair. Doom 3 was kind of like that, and I remember playing Doom 3 in the dark for the aesthetics, and yeah, that was another good one.
Yeah, but that whole, it's a dark, abandoned space station full of things that, it's full of bodies, and sometimes the bodies get up and try to eat you.
Every once in a while.
Not everybody will.
Yes.
But some bodies do.
Now, I can't recall so much if they did it in Dead Space, but again, another good example of leaving breadcrumbs and lore around. It was Doom 3. And Alien Isolation does it as well, where you find bottles and they might have bottles. You find bodies and they might have like a data pad that explains what's going on, or maybe a last note, or just like, hey, I'm going home in 3 weeks. I'm so glad to be out of here. This place sucks because everything's gone, that type thing. But again, weaving those breadcrumbs back in, there's definitely a lot of different ways you can do that.
Yeah. And getting back onto the topic of using the house as location for all of this, utilize the parts of the house that people don't normally go to. Utilize attics. Utilize basements and crawl spaces, especially crawl spaces. I have not seen anybody in a very long time utilize a crawl space under a house in an RPG situation.
Yeah, I mean, if you want some creepy stuff, get under a house.
Oh, anywhere on the house that is hard for people to get to, that's where you're going to find all of the weirdness.
Yeah. Is it going to be a den of spiders or maybe a dead body? You never know.
Yeah. So, as an example, a friend of ours had an issue about a year and a half ago where their washing machine sprung a leak. And it just so happened, I didn't put two and two together until I was crawling around in their crawl space, inspecting some things. It just so happens that right there next to where the washing machine is set up is a vent register in the floor, face up in the floor for the HVAC.
Oh.
And I was going around underneath this house looking for a potential water leak. And I'm looking around and I see the ductwork over on this end. And I'm like, that looks off. That doesn't look right. And I go and I touch it. And this whole 6-inch flex duct is all full of water.
Oh my.
It's like, I'm talking like a 20-foot run of this stuff is just full of water. I'm like, yeah, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah. So with that, you could turn that into a water trap in an RPG real quick.
Yeah.
Really, really quick. Which again would be kind of insidious. Again, thinking about things breaking down, I'm thinking of the original Die Hard, again, crawling through the ducts and then, whole floors that was nothing but shattered glass that, you're going through for difficult terrain and taking injuries. Again, using furniture as cover and so again, a good use of environment with that movie as well.
Yeah. And talking about using the ducts, if you were to say not use water in this and if you had some sort of slime monster.
Yeah.
Or if you had something that was more, a monstrous creature that was more along the lines of something like a ferret.
Yeah.
Something that could get in and use this as a means of transport. And who, if you had something like a dire weasel sort of situation where they get into the ductwork and they've gotten a few spots where they chewed holes in it so that they can get into and out of the domicile by going through this hole in the ductwork and then going through the ducts to get to wherever they want to go. And vice versa, they can get into the ducts and they can get to one of these holes to pop out into the crawl space to get out of the house. This would be a way to set up situations where if you are in sight of the ductwork, you are at risk of being ambushed.
Absolutely. So with that, I was thinking instead of a dire weasel, if you were at like a mountain giant's abandoned domicile or fortress, a white dragon would absolutely do this. Absolutely would be using crawl spaces and ductworks, especially for those ambush attacks, because the white dragons tend to be a lot more bestial and kind of more animalistic anyway.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
Yeah, white dragons, remorays, behirs.
Yeah.
Anything that is vaguely tube-shaped.
Yes, tubes.
Yeah,
the giant danger noodles.
Yes. I mean, heck, at that point, just snakes.
Yeah.
Venomous snakes, giant snakes, constrictors.
Yeah, you go to the old ranger's home and the ranger liked, collecting venomous snakes. Maybe they were making anti-venom and like all of the snakes have gotten out. And you're trying to find the ranger and what happened to them.
Well, I think we found out what happened to them. All the venomous snakes got out.
Maybe they're on adventure and they just left and then stuff happened afterwards. You don't know yet.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. That's another thing that don't really see too terribly often is, people utilizing pets.
It's the Tiger King.
You might have guard animals, like animals that are there with the specific purpose of guarding the property. But, not every animal that is kept at a house is a guard animal. People have pets because they just like the critters. And so utilizing that as something else to bring into this, whether it is, this is somebody who has some exotic pet and your goal is to go and steal it, or maybe it is a pet that is unconventional, that is normally not associated with being a guard animal, but for whatever reason this one in particular is especially vicious.
This is my pet owlbear.
Or on the other side, something that would normally be very territorial and a great guard animal that's just a big fluffy puppy.
I'm pet that dog.
Get them thinking that this critter is going to attack them because of the way that it looks. But then if they take the time to actually observe it and to actually try and interact with it, they find out that it's just this little sweetheart, that it's like a golden retriever. It's just so happy to see you.
Yeah. I think a really good example of this is when we played the A-Man campaign forever ago.
Yeah.
In the tavern had a table that was actually a mimic, but the mimic was kind of like the tavern's mascot. And so, you'd feed it some coins or some plate or some food, and it just did that. And if you tried to, fight, people would get mad. Don't mess with my mimic, But yeah, they had a pet mimic, of all things.
Yeah, that was a nice touch on Eric's part.
Yeah, I want a pet mimic.
That would be handy, having a pet mimic. As long as it wasn't an especially mischievous mimic. Fair. That would routinely prank you and,
Yes, yeah, I do enjoy mischievous critters, so that is a problem.
That is true, and I am all for the novelty of having a mimic pet, but the night that it turns into my toothbrush is the night that it gets rehomed.
Fair, very fair.
Because we're not doing that.
We ain't doing this, Joe.
No.
Yeah, so again, there are a lot of options, and really, just sitting down and pondering it for a little bit, you can come up with a lot of really fun ideas that you wouldn't really think to throw in. And honestly, just that little bit of extra adds so much to the environment and can add so much to the game. It's like if you're doing a drawing and just a little bit of shading goes a long way. Just that little bit extra is the difference between a bland meh and something memorable.
Yeah. And, going back to talking about the areas of the house where people don't normally go, this may be something where it's especially unpleasant to go through it, because I'm going to be completely honest. Attics and crawl spaces are not pleasant places to crawl through.
Generally not.
I mean, they're dark. Crawl spaces tend to be wet quite often. Attics tend to be very hot most of the time. And they're full of dust and cobwebs and
rabid raccoons.
Yeah, especially crawl spaces. Crawl spaces are notorious for being full of critters, like yellow jacket nests and feral cats and snakes and spiders and right. all of those things that you don't necessarily want to come face to face with in a confined space. But, these are all things that you can implement whenever you're establishing the layout of your house here. Maybe going in through the crawl space is the shortcut way to get into the house. And you have to put up with the uncomfortableness and the inconvenience and the potential hazards in the crawl space in order to be able to get in without having to pick the locks on the doors and, risk setting off the security system and whatnot. Because maybe they have like a little trapdoor, in the laundry room that goes into the crawl space from the inside of the house, to have quick access to the water shutoff or whatever. But they don't have a lock on the outside door going into the crawl space. And so you're able to get into the crawl space because it's, hidden by shrubs, and you get in and you're able to crawl the length of the house and come out through this trapdoor. And now you're inside the house without having set off any of the security systems.
This is also a good point. Again, you can use skill checks. So coming through it, maybe you are sneaking through this crawl space and you have to do so silently. Again, use your senses. It's wet, it's damp. Maybe you have to make a will save to see if you're going to freak out because now you've got a centipede that's like crawling up around and maybe trying to tickle the inside of your ear, and you can't do anything about it because you don't have the room to move. Are you going to freak out about this thing or not? If
Yeah,
you're coming
we
through this,
probably should have put a content warning on that one.
sorry, if you're crawling through the sewers, are you going to have to make a con save so you don't become violently physically ill yourself because of all the gases and the stench and the
Yeah,
smell?
yeah. Anything involving sewage is just inherently unpleasant for everyone involved.
Yeah.
And I don't think that gets utilized enough in games. Like there's a reason why we put it underground where nobody can get to it. And it's because it puts off things that make you violently ill.
Yeah.
Um,
Again, going through, if you're trying to escape, and this is terrible, but, an old Western trope is hiding in the outhouse, and sneaking down the privy because no one's going to look inside there. But can you maintain staying in there long enough to let everybody pass before you crawl out?
or the Shawshank Redemption sort of thing.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm wanting to say it was a Far Side comic where somebody is digging their way out of prison and they're about to dig into the cesspit under
Yeah, I
the
think that's Far
latrine.
Side. Yeah. Oh, so bad. Oh. And then you have bugs in the ears.
Yeah, and actually, going to do a deep cut here. The movie Lady Hawk.
Not familiar with that one.
Oh, this is from the 80s. It was Rutger Hauer and I forget what the actress's name was, but Matthew Broderick is in it, and he's like this little pickpocket,
Okay.
and he breaks out of prison by crawling through the drain in the floor of the cell
Oh, okay.
and crawling down the drain and out through the sewers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's our introduction to him.
Yeah.
In the beginning of the story is he has broken himself out of jail by going down the drain in the floor.
I like it.
Because it's 1980s, it's like, 18-year-old Matthew Broderick, and he's like 80 pounds soaking wet.
He's a twig. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so those are the sorts of things that, I wanted to touch on tonight. Just, getting in that mind space of adding more things to your domestic scenarios, adding more things to interact with, adding more elements that can go wrong.
Yeah.
Things of that nature.
No, I like this too. And honestly, this is a good place to start. And as a world building exercise, using this to see what you can actually do with your environment. So, I mean, if you can put, 10, 15, 20 minutes, an hour into thought, okay, well, what am I going to do with this house or what am I going to do with this building? You can do the same thing if you're in a castle, if you're in a cave, if you're in, a mountain pass or a valley and your players are in the wilderness or wherever else. Like I said, just giving a little bit of thought to how your players are going to interact with their environment and how the environment's going to interact with your players rather than you're on a road. Okay, well, I guess we're just on a perfectly flat, green, grassy plain and nothing's happening and it's flat and boring and it's Nebraska, no offense to people in Nebraska, but it's just that flat, open expanse versus, again, things that they can interact with, things that can happen. Again, just that extra detail really makes the world alive.
Yeah. So I think that pretty much covers, that's a good place to wrap up.
Yeah.
So thank you everyone for listening. Hopefully we didn't ramble too much. If you have any comments, suggestions, or ideas, send us an email, undercommontaste@gmail.com, or come join us on our Discord. You can find a link to our Discord through our website, undercommontaste.com. You can also find links there to our Patreon, patreon.com/undercommontaste, or our itch store, undercommontaste.itch.io.
If this is your first time, we're glad you found us. We hope we were able to help you come up with some good ideas, maybe some inspiration for things you want to do. You can find our other episodes talking about world building or lore, deep dives. Just search Under Common Taste on the podcatcher of your choice.
I think next time we're going to wrap up our talk about dragons. Like I said, we've got a few dragons that I want to touch on that we haven't quite gotten to yet. And it will be the last episode that we do on dragons specifically, at least for this series. We may come back and talk about dragons again later.
No more
But
Dagrons.
for this series, I mean, because this will be what, number 11? I think is the 11th episode.
Okay, I thought we were at 12, but yeah.
Yeah, it could be 12. But yet, we've done a bunch of dragon episodes at this point, and I think it's time to wrap that up and move on to something else.
I think we have well and fully satisfied the daughter to,
Yes.
or
Especially
the promise to the daughter.
yes. Especially since she has asked for more biome stuff, so we can get back to work on some biome stuff. So anyway, thank you all for listening. Stay safe, and we will see you again in 2 weeks.
Happy gaming.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of Undercommon Taste. Our theme song is Massacre Anne, written and performed by Mary Kroll and used with permission. You can find Mary online at marykroll.bandcamp.com or on Patreon at patreon.com/Dr. Mary C. Kroll. Our logo is by David Sutherland. You can find more of David's work on deviantart.com/David Sutherland or on instagram.com/Willex_73. We'll be back in 2 weeks, so stay safe, and we'll see you then.